Should you borrow to go to physical therapy school with all the changes that have been made on student loans after 2026 and beyond? We're going to take a look at the reality of things post One Big Beautiful Bill Act in terms of loan limits and kind of discuss what the ROI might be for physical therapy school and whether or not you should borrow in private student loans as well as federal student loans to attend it. So I'm going to take a look at two different universities' cost of attendance. I basically picked one that was going to represent the private higher cost option in Duke, and then one Texas Women's University that would represent a lower cost option. So if I take the direct and indirect costs of these programs, a rough estimate of these schools' cost of attendance for Duke, it's around 250, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. For Texas Women's University, I took their direct costs and then added $20,000 per year for living expenses. Let's assume that you can get a 6% interest rate for federal student loans, 8% for private. That might be too low, honestly. And then let's assume that if you didn't go to physical therapy school, you could make $70,000 working in corporate America. So let's take a look at the ROI. Depending on whether or not Department of Ed defines physical therapy programs as a professional degree, which it's kind of ridiculous that they're having to discuss that, but that's something that they're currently discussing. That will determine whether or not folks can borrow $20,500 or $50,000 per year in federal loans. And if you're limited to this lower number, if you go to a higher cost school, you're going to have to borrow a large amount in private student loans. In this case, over $60,000 per year. Now, federal student loan interest would accumulate in school as well as private student loan interest, and then you would come out having two different kinds of student loans. You would come out with $68,000 or so in federal student loan debt, and then about $200,000 in private student loan debt. Now, when factoring in the fact that you could sign up for an income-based repayment program, like the RAP program, you might have an affordable monthly payment, but you would also have to contend with a very large private student loan payment. So if you sum those payments together, your income after taxes and student loans, and let's take a pause for a second and say, well, what will your income range be after graduation? For physical therapists, in our survey that we did in 2025, we found the average income was about $97,000. So if you pay, your income after tax, let's say it's about $77,000 if you're earning in the average, and then you have, large amounts of money going towards student loans, you have a substantially less amount of money than if you just went out and got a corporate job. I mean, $20,000 to $25,000 less in take-home income while you're paying off your private student loans. Now, when the private student loans are gone, you do have more income, after those private student loans are gone, but probably not enough to justify the amount of debt that you would be taking out. Now, if I contrast this and look at this with the lower cost school, now you can see that this is a little bit more of a reasonable choice. So somebody's not going to need to borrow that much private student loans, mostly just to cover some living expenses in this case. And the private student loan payment would be a lot more manageable. And importantly, the income after taxes and student loans as an average income physical therapist would be roughly similar to somebody in a corporate job with no student loans. But then, of course, once those student loans are gone, you have a substantially higher income than somebody that took a corporate job and hopefully a more enjoyable lifestyle where you're, not sitting behind a desk staring at screens maybe as much all day as some people might be doing. So when thinking about taking out private student loans, Student Loan Planner has got a marketplace that you could use if you do need to borrow for PT school. It's important to think about, the fact that if your total debt is going to be more than 1.5 times your expected post-graduation income, it's probably going to be a number that you're not going to want to borrow unless you have extra money coming from family or the ability to work while you're in school, or if you're just extremely passionate about the idea of being a physical therapist. So those are some things to consider as you decide whether or not to go to PT school and which school do you go to. In general, with the new loan rules, you want to go to the cheapest physical therapy program you are okay going to. And if you go to a more expensive one, just know that it might not yield the ROI that you're hoping for. So be really cautious when you're borrowing for PT school. Make sure you feel like it's a good deal before you go and sign on to the loans. And if you need any help, Student Loan Planners here. Follow us. Comment below if you have any thoughts about this analysis.